I never thought I'd be in a situation where I had to change the locks on my own house to keep my sister out, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, especially when family is involved. Let me explain. I'm Emma, and I have an older sister named Sabrina. Growing up, Sabrina was always seen as the golden child, the one who took risks, followed her dreams, and supposedly knew how to live life to the fullest. She married young, had 2 beautiful daughters, and inherited our grandmother's house. I, on the other hand, followed what my family called the safe route. I worked hard, saved money, and eventually bought my own home with a mortgage, using the $100,000 our grandmother left me as a down payment. "Emma, you're so boring," Sabrina would often say during our family gatherings. "All you do is work and pay bills. Where's your sense of adventure?" I'd just shrug it off. My house may not have been as impressive as hers, but it was mine and I was proud of it. I had my routine, my peace, and my independence. Little did I know my so-called boring life would soon be turned upside down. It all started about 6 months ago when Sabrina burst into my house on a Sunday afternoon. Her eyes were sparkling with excitement. "Emma, you won't believe the opportunity I found," she exclaimed, barely taking off her shoes before rushing into my living room. I was in the middle of my weekend cleaning routine, but I could see the look in her eyes. It was the same look she had when she convinced our parents to let her backpack through Europe at 18, or when she decided to have a destination wedding in Bali that nearly bankrupted our parents. I put down my cleaning supplies, expecting something big. "What is it this time?" I asked. "This amazing medical startup," she began, pulling out her phone to show me some flashy presentation. "They're revolutionizing the healthcare industry. Tom and I are thinking about selling the house and investing in it. You should do the same." I stared at her, wondering if she was joking. Sell my house? The one I'm still paying a mortgage on? To invest in a startup? "Don't be such a scaredy cat," she rolled her eyes. "This is a guaranteed return. Triple the investment in just 1 year. You could buy an even bigger house after that." "Sabrina, I don't know anything about medical startups or investments," I tried to reason. "I'm perfectly happy with my current house." She looked at me with that mixture of pity and disappointment that I'd gotten used to over the years. "This is why you'll always be stuck in the same place, Emma. You're afraid to take risks, to grow. You're just stagnant." The conversation quickly turned into an argument. Was she calling me a loser for not jumping at this amazing opportunity? When I expressed concern about her risking her family's only home, especially with 2 young daughters to think about, she just laughed. The day after Sabrina's visit, I went to see our parents, hoping they might talk some sense into her. I should have known better. Mom was in the kitchen, making her signature lasagna, when I brought up the conversation with Sabrina. "Your sister told me about the investment opportunity," Mom said, not even looking up from her cooking. "I think you should seriously consider it, Emma." "Mom, she's talking about selling her house, her only house, and putting all that money into some startup we know nothing about." Mom put down her spatula and turned to face me, wearing that expression I'd seen countless times growing up, the one that said I was disappointing her yet again. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" she sighed. "Sabrina is always striving for self-development. She's not afraid to take risks, but you're just lazy, Emma. You don't want to change your life for the better." Over the next few weeks, I tried everything to convince Sabrina to reconsider. We had countless phone calls, each one ending the same way. "Emma, this is my chance to get rich quickly," she'd say. "Stop being such a party pooper. This is a legitimate investment opportunity." "Have you even researched this company?" I asked during one of our calls. "Have you talked to a financial advisor?" But Sabrina wouldn't listen. She sold her house and invested most of the money into the medical startup. With the leftover funds, she and Tom took their daughters to the Maldives, renting a house there while they waited for their dividends to roll in. The photos started flooding my phone almost immediately. Sabrina, lounging on pristine beaches. Her daughters, playing in crystal-clear waters. Sunset dinners by the ocean. Each photo came with a caption designed to twist the knife. "Living my best life while some people are too scared to chase their dreams," she posted. "This could have been you, sis, if you weren't such a chicken." "Another day in paradise, while the boring people stay home," she captioned another. Even our parents got in on it during our weekly family dinners. They'd look at Sabrina's latest Instagram posts and say, "See, Emma, you could be there too if you weren't so careful all the time. Your sister really knows how to live." I sat through these dinners, quietly eating my food while they browsed through Sabrina's photos and talked about her courage and vision. Sometimes I wondered if I was the crazy one for not seeing this amazing opportunity they were all so excited about. But deep down, something told me it was all too good to be true. 6 months passed, and the photos from the Maldives stopped coming. At first, I thought maybe Sabrina had grown tired of trying to make me jealous. Then one morning I saw the headlines: "Medical startup exposed as massive fraud scheme. Thousands of investors lose everything in healthcare scam. Startup founders flee country amid fraud investigation." My hands shook as I read the articles. The company Sabrina had invested in, the one she had gambled her entire future on, was nothing but an elaborate scam. All that money, our grandmother's house, everything was gone. I tried calling Sabrina, but her phone was off. Tom's too. Finally, after 3 days of silence, I got a text from Mom. "Your sister's coming home." They arrived at our parents' house looking nothing like the carefree family from those beach photos. Sabrina's designer clothes were replaced with wrinkled travel wear, and the girls looked exhausted. They had spent every last penny from the house sale trying to maintain their lifestyle in the Maldives, believing until the very end that their investment would pay off. 2 weeks later, Mom called me. Her voice sounded strained, different from the proud tone she used when bragging about Sabrina's brave investment. "Emma, we need to talk," she said. "Can you come over?" When I arrived, the house was chaos. Toys scattered everywhere, suitcases half unpacked in corners, the sound of my nieces running around upstairs. Mom looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. "I can't do this anymore," she confessed, slumping into a kitchen chair. "Our house is too small for all of us. I haven't had a proper night's sleep in 2 weeks, and I'm constantly cooking and cleaning." Dad sat beside her, looking equally worn out. "Emma, we hate to ask this, but you have that big house." Before they could finish, Sabrina walked into the kitchen. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, and gone was the confident sister who'd mocked my boring life choices. In her place stood someone I barely recognized. "Please, Emma," she sobbed, grabbing my hands. "Just for 3 months, that's all we need. Tom and I will find jobs and save up for a place of our own. I promise we won't stay longer than that." I looked at her, really looked at her. The designer clothes and expensive jewelry were gone. The smug smile she wore in all those beach photos was nowhere to be found. Her daughters peeked around the doorframe, quiet and uncertain, so different from their usual bubbly selves. 3 months, I finally said, my voice firm. "Not a day more." Thank you, she cried, throwing her arms around me. "I promise we'll have everything figured out by then. You won't regret this." The first few weeks of having Sabrina's family in my house were interesting. I expected them to immediately start job hunting, but that's not what happened. Instead, my house became some sort of social hub, with Sabrina and Tom's friends constantly coming and going. "We need to decompress," Sabrina explained one evening when I found her and Tom drinking wine with their friends in my living room. "We also need to maintain our social connections. That's how you find good job opportunities." But as the weeks passed, I realized their connections weren't leading to anything. Every morning, I'd leave for work to find them still in their pajamas, planning another get-together. Every evening, I'd come home to find them networking with friends. "When are you actually going to start looking for work?" I asked, 1 month into their stay. "You're so uptight, Emma," Tom said, scrolling through his phone. "We're still processing our trauma. We need time to gain strength." Finally, after a month of processing, they both found jobs. I thought this would be the turning point, that they'd start saving money for their own place. But no, instead of saving, they started spending their salaries on what Sabrina called maintaining their standard of living. My kitchen became filled with exotic ingredients I couldn't pronounce, delivered by expensive specialty food services. "I can't just switch to regular food overnight," Sabrina explained while unpacking a $200 grocery delivery. "My body got used to certain things in the Maldives. I need to transition slowly. When the 3-month mark approached, I decided it was time for a serious conversation. I found Sabrina in the kitchen, ordering another exotic meal delivery on her phone. I tried to keep my voice casual. "Have you started looking for places to rent?" She looked up from her phone, surprised. "Oh, come on, Emma. Don't be so pushy. We need more time to find the right place." "More time? The agreement was 3 months. That was the deal." She frowned. "Why are you being so selfish? We need to find a place that's in the right school district for the girls. These things take time." "And how many places have you actually looked at?" I asked. Her silence was the answer I needed. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Emma, Sabrina told me you're trying to kick them out," she said accusingly. "I'm not kicking them out, Mom. The agreement was 3 months. It's been 3 months. She has small children, Emma. You can't just send them out on the street. What kind of sister are you?" I closed my eyes, feeling a headache coming on. "Fine," I said finally. 3 more months, but that's it." "You're doing the right thing," Mom said, her voice softening. "They're family, after all." That word, family, was starting to feel more like a burden than a blessing. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a huge mistake. When the utility bills arrived that month, I nearly had a heart attack. The numbers were more than triple what I usually paid. Water usage had skyrocketed, electricity consumption was through the roof, and don't even get me started on the heating bills. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by bills, doing calculations that made my head spin. My mortgage payment was already substantial. I had put down $100,000 from my grandmother's inheritance as a down payment, but the monthly payments were still significant. Now, with 4 additional people in the house, my utilities had become another massive expense, one I hadn't planned for. "Sabrina," I called out one evening, bills in hand, "we need to talk about these." She glanced at the papers, then back at her phone. "Oh, those look high." "They are high, very high. I think it's reasonable that you and Tom help with them, considering you're both working now." She looked at me as if I'd suggested she give up oxygen. "Emma, we're trying to save money for our own place, remember? We can't afford to pay bills right now. Besides, everything will work out. Stop worrying so much." But I had plenty to worry about. On top of the financial strain, I had somehow become an unpaid babysitter every weekday. The routine was exhausting. Our parents would pick up the girls from school and watch them until I finished work. Then, instead of going home to relax, I'd drive to our parents' house, collect my nieces, take them back to my house, help them with homework, make dinner, and wait. Wait and wait. Sabrina and Tom were supposed to be home by 6 p.m., but they rarely arrived before 9 p.m. "Sorry, we're late." Sabrina would breeze in, looking far too put together for someone who'd supposedly been stuck at work. The meeting ran long. I understood perfectly when I saw the Instagram stories their friends posted. Happy hour drinks, dinner gatherings, social events, all featuring my sister and her husband, while I sat at home watching their children. One particularly late night, after they finally returned home and the girls were asleep, I confronted Sabrina again about their plans to move out. "The deadline for this extended stay is coming up," I reminded her. "Have you started looking for places?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Everything will be fine, Emma. You really need to stop stressing about everything." That wasn't an answer. "Sabrina, are you even saving any money?" "Of course we are," she said, but wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just trust me, okay? When have I ever let you down?" I bit my tongue to keep from listing all the times she had let me down. Instead, I watched her disappear upstairs to her room, my guest room in my house, the house I was paying for, while I sat surrounded by bills I couldn't afford and a growing resentment I couldn't contain. 6 months. It had been 6 months of mounting bills, endless babysitting, and watching my sister and her husband treat my house like their personal resort. I knew I couldn't keep going like this. I had tried being patient, tried being understanding, but enough was enough. I decided it was time for one final conversation. I called Sabrina and Tom into the living room one evening after the girls had gone to bed. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me as I sat across from them. This was it. the moment I had been putting off for months. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. "Next week marks exactly 6 months since you moved in, as we agreed. That's when you need to move out." I expected protests, explanations, maybe even promises to start looking for a place immediately. What I didn't expect was laughter. Sabrina actually laughed. "Move out?" she said, still chuckling. "Oh, Emma, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," I said, my voice firm. "The agreement was 6 months. That was already double the original time we discussed." Sabrina exchanged an amused look with Tom before turning back to me. "But why would we move? The girls love it here. We're all settled in, and let's be honest, this is good for you too." "Good for me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "How is this good for me?" "Think about it, Emma," she continued, not missing a beat. "You're getting real-life experience in taking care of a family. It's perfect practice for when you finally settle down and have kids of your own. You should be thanking us, really." I just sat there, stunned into silence. Tom nodded in agreement. "Plus," he added, spreading his arms wide, "this is a wonderful house for a large family. There's plenty of room for all of us. No point in having all the space just for one person, right?" They kept talking, making plans about future room arrangements and discussing how we could optimize the space better, but I stopped listening. In that moment, I realized something that should have been obvious from the start. They had never intended to leave. All the delays, the excuses, the promises, it was all a game. They were playing me. I nodded along with whatever they were saying, letting them think they'd won, but inside my head, a plan was already forming. I was done. I was done being their bank, their babysitter, their emotional punching bag. It was time to take control of my own life again. The next morning, I called my office and scheduled a vacation day for the following week. Then, I started researching locksmiths. 7 days later, I woke up early and got dressed like I was going to work. I waited until Sabrina and Tom had left for their jobs, then sprang into action. The locksmith arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. As he worked on the locks, I started on the bedrooms. 6 months of their lives had spread through my house like an invasive species, but I was determined to root it all out. I worked methodically, room by room, packing their clothes, books, toys, and all their belongings into cardboard boxes. Their expensive organic groceries went into separate boxes. Their toiletries were carefully wrapped and packed. The girls' toys and school supplies were organized and labeled. I was angry, yes, but I wasn't going to be cruel about it. I wasn't going to throw their stuff out on the street. By early afternoon, the locksmith had finished installing the new locks, and I had filled my garage with neatly stacked boxes containing every trace of their presence in my house. I stood in my newly emptied guest rooms, looking at the bare mattresses and empty closets, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief. It was over. I was free. As evening approached, my phone started buzzing with calls from Mom. I watched it ring and ring, each time her name flashing on the screen. I didn't answer. Then the texts started coming. "Emma, where are you? The girls are waiting. Emma, this isn't funny. Come get the children now. Emma, answer your phone." I turned my phone to silent and waited. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard them pull up in the driveway. The usual sound of car doors slamming, the girls chattering, and then the unexpected jingle of keys against the new locks. At first, they tried different keys, probably thinking they weren't putting them in correctly. Then came Tom's voice. "What the hell?" The knock started softly at first, then grew louder. "Emma!" Sabrina's voice rang out. "The keys aren't working! Let us in!" I walked to the door, but I didn't open it. "The keys aren't working because I changed the locks," I said, my voice calm but firm. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then came the explosion. "You what?" Sabrina screamed. "Open this door right now." "No," I said firmly. "I'm done. I'm done paying double utilities. I'm done being your unpaid babysitter. I'm done watching you waste money while living rent-free in my house." I heard the girls starting to cry, and Sabrina immediately used that to her advantage. She brought them closer to the door, their sobs clearly audible. "Listen to them, Emma," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "Look what you're doing to your own nieces. How can you be so heartless?" "Don't you dare use your children as emotional blackmail," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "If you cared about their stability, you wouldn't have gambled away their home on a get-rich-quick scheme. You wouldn't have spent 6 months avoiding responsibility while I cleaned up your mess." "Just let us in, Emma," Sabrina begged, changing tactics. "We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said coldly. "Your things are packed in boxes in the garage. You can take them now. You had no right." Tom shouted from behind her. "I had every right. This is my house. The house I pay for. The house you've been living in for free while lying to my face about finding your own place." They stood outside for another 20 minutes, alternating between threats, pleading, and insults. Finally, I heard them moving toward the garage. It took several trips to load everything into their car, punctuated by Sabrina's loud complaints and Tom's angry muttering. Just as I thought it was over, my phone rang again. It was Mom. "How dare you throw your sister out?" she screamed before I could even say hello. "What kind of person does this to their own family? Sabrina should be living with you," she said, her voice frantic. "You need to help your sister." "I did help her, Mom," I said, my voice barely controlled. "For 6 months. Now it's your turn. Let's see how you like having them live with you for half a year." The line went dead. I stood in my empty, quiet house, feeling simultaneously terrible and relieved. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in 6 months I could breathe freely in my own home. The aftermath of that night was exactly what I expected. Within days, my phone was flooded with messages and calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, Mom had been busy spreading her version of events. At first, I tried to explain my side of the story, spent hours on the phone with aunts, uncles, and cousins, detailing the 6 months of financial strain, the broken promises, and the constant babysitting. But it felt like talking to a wall. They had already made up their minds based on Mom's narrative of the cruel sister who threw her family out on the street. Eventually, I stopped trying to defend myself. Let them think what they wanted. I had my peace back, and that was worth more than their approval. Then, about a month after everything happened, my friend Rachel called with some interesting news. "You're not going to believe this," she said, trying to contain her laughter. "Your parents kicked Sabrina out. Apparently your mom couldn't handle it anymore, said something about them treating her house like a hotel and never helping with anything." I couldn't help but laugh. 6 months. I had dealt with it, and my parents couldn't even make it through one. But the real kicker came a few weeks later, when my cousin Jessica reached out. She'd always been the family gossip, but for once I was grateful for her tendency to share everything she heard. "Emma, you need to hear this," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. "Sabrina and Tom found an apartment. But guess what they're doing with their money now? They're investing in some space startup." I pressed my hand to my forehead. "After everything that happened?" "Oh, it gets better," Jessica continued, clearly enjoying herself. "She's going around to all the relatives telling everyone how this is going to make her rich. Says she's going to buy a house twice the size of yours." "Are you serious?" I couldn't believe it. After losing everything to one bad investment, Sabrina was at it again, trying to drag the family into another get-rich-quick scheme. Jessica wasn't done. She came to my house last week with all these fancy presentations about space mining or whatever. It's the same story all over again. I felt a strange mix of emotions, frustration, pity, and, oddly enough, relief. Relief that I'd gotten them out when I did before they could try to drag me into yet another of their schemes. These days, I don't talk to Sabrina anymore. Sometimes I miss my nieces, but I know this distance is necessary. I see their photos on social media sometimes. Sabrina still posting about their exciting investment opportunities and upcoming wealth. I hope she'll figure things out eventually, but I'm done trying to save her from herself. As for Mom, we haven't spoken since that night. But through the family grapevine, "Thank you again, Jessica. I heard she's been singing a different tune lately." "Your mom was at Aunt Linda's last week," Jessica told me. "She actually defended you, said she finally understands why you did what you did. Apparently, living with Sabrina opened her eyes to how difficult it is to share your space with people who don't respect your boundaries." I just smiled when I heard that. Sometimes people need to experience something themselves before they can understand your perspective. Maybe Mom would come around eventually, and if she does, I'll be here. But this time, it'll be on my terms. I'd learned a hard lesson in all of this. Family isn't always about doing what's best for everyone else, even if it means sacrificing your own happiness. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself. Sometimes you have to draw a line in the sand and say, no more. And when you do, even if it hurts, you'll finally start to breathe again. The weeks that followed were quiet. After everything with Sabrina and the fallout from our family, I found a strange kind of peace. My house was mine again. It felt like I could finally take a deep breath and stop holding my emotions in check all the time. No more bills stacked higher than I could manage. No more late nights spent waiting for Sabrina and Tom to show up. No more feeling like I was living someone else's life. It was just me again, and for the first time in a long while, that felt okay. But as expected, the calls from relatives didn't stop. Some of them tried to be supportive, mostly the ones who hadn't heard all of Sabrina's side of things. They'd ask how I was holding up, checking in with polite but distant concern. I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I had made my peace with my decision. What did frustrate me, though, was how many people, even now, refused to see what had really happened. Sabrina had always been good at painting herself as the victim, and with my mom still pushing her narrative, it wasn't easy to get anyone else to see the reality of the situation. One afternoon, my Aunt Rebecca called. She was one of the few who never judged me without understanding both sides. "Emma, I just wanted to check in on you," she said, her voice soft and warm. "I know things have been tough, but I've heard a lot from your mom about everything, and I just want to make sure you're okay." I could hear the concern in her voice, but I also heard the underlying assumption. Mom had clearly been talking, and not in a way that made me look good. It was that same familiar feeling, like I was fighting an uphill battle again, only this time I was fighting for something different, my own peace of mind. "I'm okay, Aunt Rebecca," I said, keeping my tone calm. "It's been hard, but I'm moving on. I had to do what was best for me." There was a pause before she spoke again, and I could tell she was thinking it through. "I don't know everything that happened, Emma, but I do know that sometimes family doesn't see things the way they really are. I just want you to know that I'm proud of you for standing your ground." It felt good to hear that, honestly. Even if it was just one person in the family, it made a difference. After all the drama, the stress, the guilt, to have someone actually acknowledge that I'd made a tough choice, a necessary choice, was more validating than I could have imagined. A few days later, I was out with friends when Rachel casually mentioned something about Sabrina that made my stomach drop. "You heard Sabrina's latest plan, right?" she asked, her tone light but with a hint of something more serious underneath. I felt my stomach tighten. "What now?" "Apparently she's been trying to convince some of the other relatives to invest in that space startup of hers," Rachel said, shaking her head. "She's all in, like full steam ahead, even after everything that happened. Some of them are actually listening to her too." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not surprised. She never learns, does she?" Rachel shook her head. "Nope, same old Sabrina. You've got to be careful though, Emma. She's got a way of convincing people that she's right, even when she's so far off." I felt a rush of frustration. How could anyone fall for her schemes again after everything that happened? It was like she never learned. Maybe she wasn't supposed to. Maybe that was just who she was. But I had learned that I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for her. I had learned that I couldn't be dragged into her chaos every time she made another bad decision. It stung a little to know that some of the relatives were still buying into her lies. But at the same time, I realized it didn't matter anymore. I had finally taken control of my life, and no one, especially Sabrina, was going to take that away from me again. The next few weeks were relatively quiet. I focused on myself. I started working out more, picking up new hobbies, and making an effort to reach out to friends I hadn't seen in a while. For the first time in months, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. It felt good. One Saturday morning, I woke up early to a quiet house and made myself a cup of coffee. I sat by the window, looking out at the neighborhood, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to relax. My life was mine again, and as much as I'd been through, as much as I had sacrificed, I was finally starting to see how that could be enough. But just when I thought I'd left all the drama behind, I got a call from my mom. Her number flashed on my phone, and for a moment, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, wanted to keep my distance, but I knew I couldn't avoid this forever. I took a deep breath and answered. "Emma," Mom said, her voice quiet. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I know I haven't been fair to you. I let Sabrina manipulate me. I see now that you were right all along." I sat there, stunned into silence for a moment. Was she really saying this? "I'm sorry," she continued. "I should have supported you. I should have listened to you instead of just following Sabrina's lead." It took me a minute to process what she was saying. This wasn't the woman I had spoken to a few months ago, the one who had defended Sabrina no matter what. No, this was someone who was finally seeing things clearly. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Emma," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I'm proud of you for sticking to your boundaries. You've taught me a lot." It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a start. Slowly, I felt the weight lifting from my chest. Maybe, just maybe, my mom was starting to see me for who I was, rather than just as the responsible, cautious daughter she'd always known. And maybe, just maybe, things could start to heal. As for Sabrina, well, I had learned not to expect anything from her anymore. I didn't need her approval, her understanding, or her schemes in my life. I had learned that I could stand on my own, and while I wasn't going to waste any more energy trying to save her from herself, I could still hope that one day she'd figure things out on her own. For now, I was focused on me, on living my life the way I wanted, without the chaos, without the guilt, just me. And I was finally okay with that. It's been a few months since everything happened. And if I'm being honest, life has felt a lot quieter. Not quieter in the bad way, though. It's more like the calm after a storm. I've had time to reflect on everything. The chaos, the stress, the frustration. And I've learned a lot. Not just about my family, but about myself, too. One of the first things I realized was how much I had been living in reaction to others for most of my life. Whether it was Sabrina's grand ideas, my mom's expectations, or the constant pressure to be the responsible one, I had spent a lot of time worrying about what everyone else needed from me. When I finally drew that line in the sand, it felt like I was giving myself permission to exist just as I was. I started making changes in small ways. I started saying no when I needed to, without feeling guilty about it. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone anymore. I also started traveling more, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time or energy for because I was too busy holding everything together. I took a trip to the mountains for a long weekend just to clear my head. And when I came back, I felt lighter, like I had a new sense of freedom. As I was getting back to myself, I also started reconnecting with friends. Rachel, for one, had been a solid source of support throughout the whole ordeal. She's one of those friends who doesn't take sides but listens without judgment. We spent an afternoon together at a cafe not long ago, talking about everything, family, life, where we were both headed. It felt so good to talk openly again, without the weight of all the drama. Work had been going well, too. I'd always been a hard worker, but lately, I felt like I'm not just getting by. I'm actually thriving. I started taking on new projects, pushing myself a little more than usual. It's nice to feel like I'm finally investing in myself, not just other people's problems. Then, one afternoon, I got an unexpected call from Mom. It's strange to say, but I was actually looking forward to it. The past few months had brought about a shift in our relationship. She was no longer the mother who saw me as the boring daughter who couldn't take risks. No, this was a new version of Mom, one who was finally starting to see me as my own person, separate from Sabrina's shadow. "Emma," she said, her voice warm but serious. "I just wanted to check in. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about you, and, well, I just want to apologize for everything. For how I acted before, for not being there when you needed me." I sat down, listening, surprised but grateful. "Mom, it's okay," I said, trying to keep the conversation calm. "You don't have to apologize. You did what you thought was right." "But I didn't," she admitted, her voice trembling a little. "I should have listened to you. I see now that you were just trying to protect yourself and everyone else, and I should have respected that. I've been thinking about that a lot." I had no idea what to say at first. To hear her acknowledge that was one of the most validating moments I could remember. Mom had always been so wrapped up in Sabrina's plans that I'd almost given up hope she'd ever understand. But here she was, taking responsibility for her part in everything. "I'm proud of you, Emma," she continued. "I'm proud of how you've handled all of this, and I just wanted you to know that." I felt a warmth spread through me. Maybe, just maybe, we were finally getting to a place where we could both move forward. I could let go of the past and allow my mom to be part of my future, on my terms. There was still a long way to go. I knew that. I didn't expect everything to magically fix itself overnight, but this was progress, real, tangible progress, and it felt good. A few days later, I heard from Sabrina. It wasn't a call I was expecting, but it came, and I was ready for it. She left a message on my voicemail. "Hey, Emma. I just wanted to say, well, I don't know if you'll even listen to this, but I'm sorry. I made a lot of mistakes, and I've been paying the price for them. I didn't mean to drag you into all that. I should have listened to you, and I see that now. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small step in the right direction, maybe." The old part of me would have wanted to immediately respond, to ask her all the questions I'd been holding on to make her fully understand how much she'd hurt me. But I didn't. Instead, I listened to the message, then deleted it. I wasn't ready to open that door again, not just yet. I knew that I needed to keep moving forward. My life was starting to feel like mine again, and I wasn't going to let anyone, including Sabrina, pull me back into the same old patterns. If she wanted to change, that was on her. I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace for someone who wasn't willing to do the work themselves. A few weeks passed, and then one day I checked my social media. There was a new post from Sabrina, of course. She was sitting in a cafe with some friends looking happy, and right next to her, sitting at the table with a big smile on his face, was Tom. It was one of those "look at how great everything is" photos, a typical Sabrina post designed to look perfect, even though I knew better. I scrolled past it. I didn't feel anything. No anger, no jealousy, just a quiet sense of relief. Sabrina was doing her thing and I was doing mine, and for once that was okay. Looking back on everything, on the pain, the frustration, the mess, I see it differently now. What happened with Sabrina, with our parents, with all the drama, was a painful chapter in my life, but it wasn't the whole story. It was a part of it, yes, but it didn't define me. I was more than that. I've learned to put myself first, to make my boundaries clear, to stand up for what I need, even if it means letting go of people I love. It's not easy, but it's necessary, and with each passing day I feel stronger, more like myself, more at peace. I'm not waiting for anyone to validate me anymore. I've done the work, and now it's my time to live, on my terms. And that feels like the start of a whole new chapter. Story 2. In any case, you will never be as excellent as your brother. My dad spat. His comments reverberated around his office with mahogany panels. The pages of my business proposal crumbled as I stood there clutching it firmly. 10 years of schooling and countless restless nights have led to this point, and with one harsh phrase, he threw me out. Ignoring our father shattering my fantasies, my brother Jacob sat clumsily in the corner of the sofa, fumbling with his phone. For 30 years, I, Madeline Brown, felt that I was meant to assist in running my father's business, Brown Technologies. I grew up surrounded by business. Market strategies were discussed over dinner. In addition, I spent my weekends not playing with friends, but observing department leaders. In contrast to Jacob, who would want to be anywhere else, I was immersed in the field. I had done it correctly. I graduated first in my class at business school, had internships at top IT companies, and even studied Mandarin to aid in the growth of our Asian market. None of that mattered, though. as I stood in my father's office that day. His daughter was the only thing he saw when he looked at me. Someone who shouldn't be trusted with his heritage and should be married off. "Take a look at what I have to offer, Dad." Trying to maintain a steady voice, I begged. "The market study provides sufficient evidence." With a swift motion of his hand, he interrupted me. "Jacob will be taking over as CEO next month. I've already determined. You ought to concentrate on locating a suitable partner. I want you to do it, and so does your mother." I looked at my brother, who had the grace to appear uneasy. At the age of 27, Jacob had barely completed his business studies and preferred playing golf to working in an office. However, he possessed the one quality that my father valued. He was the son. My chest ached with the familiar pain of being ignored. However, something was different this time. Perhaps it was my father's sly smile when he talked about finding a spouse, or the fact that he ignored the proposal I had spent months crafting. When I understood that nothing I accomplished would ever be sufficient for him, an odd serenity descended upon me. Silently, I smoothed the rumpled pages of my proposal and muttered, "You're right." My abrupt agreement startled my father, who looked up. I should think about the future. After setting the document down on his desk, I turned around and left his office. I heard him laugh behind me, presumably believing he had finally reached me. He didn't realize I wasn't giving up. I was announcing war. I sat in my apartment that evening, surrounded by market analyses and industry studies that I had collected over the years. My dining room table was covered with all of the information I knew about Brown Technologies: contracts with suppliers, networks of distribution, pain areas for customers. Because no one believed I would ever use it against them, I was given information that most people would kill to have. It is acceptable to become involved in the family business as a hobby. "It's cute that you want to learn," my father used to say with that patronizing smile. Every disparaging remark had simply motivated me to work harder in my studies, look farther. All of that information seemed like ammunition now. It buzzed on my phone. My mother sent me another mail. She wrote, "Your father means well. All he wants to do is shield you from the strain." Without responding, I switched off my phone. My mother had always attempted to mediate my father's abrasive remarks by offering tactful justifications, but she had never once confronted him or questioned his antiquated beliefs. I entered Brown Technologies the next morning for what I knew would be my final visit. My coworkers in the marketing department avoided looking at me as I tidied up my desk. News spread quickly, as did family businesses. Everyone was aware of the meeting from yesterday and how Walter Brown's ambitious daughter had finally been held accountable. Lisa from accounting walked by and murmured, "I'm sorry, Maddie. You deserved the job, as we all know." Somehow it was made worse by her pity. How many people had seen me put in twice as much effort as Jacob? Just to be ignored because I was born with the incorrect gender? My brother showed up in my doorway as I was almost done packing. He shifted uneasily and replied, "Hey, you're taking a break to consider your priorities according to Dad." "That's one way to put it," I said, squeezing my laptop bag shut harder than I should have. "Look, I understand that you're unhappy, but perhaps it's better that way." "It's really tough to run a business, Jacob." I interrupted him. "It's simpler to accept this job than to confront him, even though we both know you don't want it." As I left the building with my little box of possessions, my brother winced at the honesty of what I had spoken. I saw that the glass doors reflected myself. I appeared lighter in some way, as though I had physically changed after releasing the pressure of my father's approval. I couldn't stop thinking about it. They had no idea what I was capable of. It was surprisingly easy to decide to leave the nation. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn my position in my father's world. It was time for me to construct my now. I liquidated my trust fund in a matter of weeks. The one thing my father couldn't control, signed a lease for an office space in Singapore and booked a one-way airfare. As was to be expected, my mother's response was dramatic. "How can you forsake your family like this?" "Over the phone," she cried. "You will never be forgiven by your father." That nearly made me chuckle. For the first time in my life, I felt positive that I hadn't done anything wrong, even if forgiveness meant that I had. My grandma was the true surprise, the mother of my father. The night before I went, she arrived at my flat. Her little figure exuded resolve. She added, "Your grandfather would have been ashamed, but not in the way I thought he would be." Feeling ashamed of your father's transformation, innovation, not tradition, was the foundation of the business. She placed a heavy packet in my grasp. Everything I needed to know about my grandfather's initial plans for Brown Technologies, including his early business plans and personal journals, was contained within. He always asserted that those who had the courage to shape the future will own it. "Show them what that means," my grandma advised me. Meetings, coding sessions, and restless nights filled the first few months in Singapore. I had determined that my father's company model's most significant flaw was its antiquated supply chain management strategy. In contrast, Brown Technologies depended on manual procedures and conventional relationships. I was creating a groundbreaking AI-powered platform that could forecast consumer needs and instantly optimize stock levels. My team expanded rapidly. The brightest minds I could find were the ones I hired because they recognized the opportunity to upend a stagnant industry. The energy was electric, even though we worked in a small office with dubious air conditioning. We were getting closer to launching something that would revolutionize everything every day. After 6 months, the first significant discovery was made. A well-known tech investor noticed our prototype and saw its potential right away. "This has the potential to completely transform the industry. In our pitch meeting," she said, "how quickly can you scale?" We made quick progress after securing the necessary funds. Every flaw I had seen in my father's business, Brown Technologies, which took weeks to process orders, became a chance for innovation. It could be completed in minutes by our system. Our automated perfection replaced their manual quality control. Their inflexible hierarchy gave way to our flexible cooperation. As far as the world was concerned, I never brought up my affiliation with Brown Technologies. I was just another visionary tech entrepreneur. However, I looked over our expanding market share reports late at night. I gave myself permission to smile a little. My father was about to learn a very costly lesson about underestimating his daughter somewhere in his mahogany office. My business, Novatech Solutions, was the talk of the industry 18 months after I left. Businesses were rushing to integrate our technology as our platform was transforming the way they managed their supply chains. Every accomplishment seemed like a win for me personally, particularly after reading that Brown Technologies is having trouble keeping up with the enigmatic newcomer to the market. When I first saw the heart-pounding numbers, I was in a board meeting. In Asia, Brown Technologies' market share had dropped by 30%, and their stock was in freefall. In the digital age, my father's personal touch approach to business, which he had always taken pride in, was no longer sufficient. The clients needed efficiency, not handshakes on a golf course. For hours, a different business in Brown's portfolio stopped using our rival technology. Proudly, my head of sales made the announcement. This quarter, it is the 6th one. I maintained a neutral look as the squad erupted in applause. My intention was to maintain it that way, and they were unaware that they were celebrating the fall of my father. Later that night, as I sat in my office, staring out over the skyline of Singapore, I saw a message from Jacob on my phone. I wasn't shocked that he was contacting me now, although we hadn't spoken since I left. "Dad's losing it," he wrote. "The board is urging him to modernize, but he won't listen. Says he won't be intimidated by any upstart corporation." I didn't answer, but I grinned at the irony. My father, who spent years pushing me into fitting his limited image of what a daughter should be, was now being pushed to adapt by the same person he'd disregarded. The satisfaction was sweeter than I'd expected. The next morning brought news that sent shockwaves across our office. As part of their ambitious expansion plan, Brown Technologies had declared their goal to buy potential tech startups. Using a traditional tactic from his playbook, my father was attempting to buy his way out of difficulty. During our emergency meeting, my CFO warned that they would be coming for us shortly. We posed too great a threat to be disregarded. She was correct. The acquisition team at Brown Technology sent us the first overture in a matter of weeks. It was a generous offer, much more than the paper value of our business. Seeing it as confirmation of what we had created, my executive team was overjoyed. My CEO said, "This is a fantastic opportunity." Overnight, we would have the means to expand internationally, but I had been waiting too long to give in. Set up a meeting. I informed them that I wanted to deal with this directly. My group was taken aback. They didn't challenge my judgment, even though I often avoided acquisition discussions. Even if they didn't understand my intuition, they would come to believe them. They had no idea that I was at last prepared to come out as myself. I saw the city lights that night flutter like stars from my balcony. I reflected about the day I left my father's workplace and all the evenings I had spent questioning my abilities and wondering whether I was doing something wrong. My error now cost millions of dollars, and the father who had never trusted me was going to find out just how much he had lost. Once more, my phone buzzed. Jacob has another message. Dad intends to take a plane to Singapore for the purchase meeting, claims that he must deal with this one directly. Excellent. I considered setting my phone aside. A long overdue family reunion was in order. When I arrived on the day of the meeting, our contemporary office environment was alive with interest, a far cry from my father's typical domain, which was filled with mahogany. I decided on our largest conference room, which boasts breathtaking city views and floor-to-ceiling windows. With medications in hand, my crew sat prepared, poised and professional. I enjoyed the minute before my father recognized me as he entered with his counselors at his sides. He was older and more weathered than I had recalled. Sprinting. It had taken its toll from a failed business. Before focusing on me, his gaze surveyed the room with the haughty assurance I was so familiar with. His face was pale as he sat placidly at the head of the table. "Madeline." "Hi, Father," I answered, maintaining a steady tone. "Please sit down. We have a lot to talk about." My father remained still in the doorway as his advisors looked at one other in confusion. He was having trouble processing what he was seeing, and I could see it. His daughter, whom he had so casually disregarded, currently seated in the position of power. "What is this?" He made a demand. His astonishment gave way to rage. "Are you playing any particular type of game?" I pointed to the presentation screen behind me and remarked, "No game, just business. I am the founder of Nova Tech Solutions, constructed it and made it the market leader. You're anxious to get it immediately." There was an overwhelming quiet in the room. My crew gaped as they watched. Many of them had never heard of my affiliation with Brown Technologies before. Realizing the consequences of this revelation, my father's advisors were feverishly muttering among themselves. "Not possible." My dad sputtered out, "You were unable to. This is not the impossibility. I said that I had developed a solution that is transforming the industry while displaying our company's growth statistics, or that I accomplished it without your assistance." His throat was cleaned by one of his counselors. "We're here to talk about a serious business proposal, Miss Brown, regardless of your personal relationship." Naturally, I grinned. "Let's talk about how my business has taken 40% of the Asian market. Or maybe you want to discuss how your whole company strategy is now outdated due to our AI-powered platform." At last, my father was able to speak up. "This is what you did to ruin me." "Your own dad?" I said, my smile dimming. "No. You taught me that I couldn't manage a business because I'm a woman, so I established one instead. One that is superior to yours in every aspect." He flushed. "Decide on a price." He snarled. "Everybody has one." I straightened my blazer and got to my feet. "Dad, that's where you're mistaken. Money isn't the issue here. It wasn't. My legacy is this business, the one you wouldn't let me construct with you." I circled the table until I was standing right in front of him. "We've turned down your offer." He responded, "You can't do this." But his tone had become weak. I saw terror in his eyes for the first time in my life. "I've done so already." I answered. The meeting was adjourned. My father's face was scarlet with embarrassment and anger as he raced out of the meeting room. A burden was lifted off my shoulders. Leaving behind their unopened presentation folders, slick black binders bearing the Brown Technologies logo, his advisors hurried after him. I'd seen the world growing up. That was not what was expected. The startled stillness that had descended upon the room was broken by my CFO's words. "You're the daughter of Walter Brown." I faced my team, the individuals who had supported my idea without being fully informed of my background. Yes, I am. More significantly, though, I am the CEO who will take this business worldwide. The weeks that followed flew by. After the press learned who I was, all business publications immediately wanted to publish the story. The month's top story was about a tech heiress upending a family business. There were so many texts on my phone. My mother, relatives, friends, and former co-workers all wanted to know how the obedient daughter had become a rival in the corporate world. I only read Jacob's message in its entirety. "I've always known you're more skilled than I am at this, in light of its value." I regret not saying it sooner. My grandmother, who used to take me there as a youngster, asked me to tea at her favorite restaurant. As she read the most recent story on Novatech's achievement, her eyes glistened with joy. "This would have delighted your granddad." Closing her cup, she said, "He founded the business with the conviction that innovation was more significant than tradition. You didn't forget it, but your father did." According to market commentators, Brown Technologies would require significant restructuring in order to remain viable. They said that my father was under pressure to resign. Younger leadership that could modernize the business before it was too late was what the board was looking for. However, I had lost interest in my father's firm. We were creating new features that would further transform the industry as Novatech was growing into Europe. Regardless of their identities, my crew was enthusiastic, driven, and most importantly, appreciated. My assistant buzzed in late one evening while I was sitting in my office going over plans for expansion. "Your dad has come to visit you. I thought about shooing him away but changed my mind. Allow him to witness what his daughter created without his presence." He walked in carefully, appearing unsure in this setting so unlike from his usual workplace. "Madeline." His voice was not as authoritative as usual when he spoke. "We must speak. What is it about?" I didn't give him a seat when I asked. Family or business? He acknowledged both. "The board. They want you to return to spearhead the digital transformation of Brown Technologies." The sound of my laughter reverberated off the glass walls. "You still don't understand? I did not establish this business to prove anything to you. Because I'm skilled at what I do, I was able to build it. Your approval is no longer required of me." My words made him wince, finally realizing the price of what he had done. In addition to market share or business value, he had a daughter who was willing to give him everything. "You ought to go." Silently, I said, "In the morning I have a meeting with investors from Europe." As he went, I strolled to the window and stared out at the city lights. A young woman was told she couldn't accomplish anything because of who she was somewhere in those streets. I thought she would disprove their claims that my instant triumph turned into a tech legend. The quiet triumphs that followed Brown Technologies' stock continuing to fall as more customers migrated to our platform were not covered by the news. At last, my father's board acted and he was forced to retire early, a disgrace he could not bear. Refusing to confront the industry that had once adored him, he withdrew to his mansion. Novatech, meanwhile, took off. Our development staff released innovations more quickly than rivals could keep up, and our European growth surpassed all expectations. The workplace was a hive of activity and ideas, generating the collaborative atmosphere I had always envisioned at Brown Technologies. My grandma stopped by our Singapore office one morning. She grabbed my hand while I gave her a tour, introduced her to my team, and showed her our newest technologies. "For you, I have something." Taking out a battered leather journal, she said, "Notes taken by your grandfather when he first founded the business." She pointed to a section that was underlined when she opened it to a marked page. "One does not inherit a genuine heritage. It is earned via foresight and perseverance. On the day your father joined the firm, he wrote that. I believe he understood even then that innovation requires more than just birthright," she said. The words resonated. I had battled for a position in my father's legacy for all those years, not understanding that I needed to create my own. Now, standing in my own firm, surrounded by individuals who recognized me for my ability rather than my name, I finally realized what genuine success felt like. Once written off as Walter Brown's daughter, the industry suddenly recognized me as the trailblazer who revolutionized supply chain management, Madeline Brown. I had worked hard to gain the recognition. Singapore hosted a global technology summit organized by Novatech 6 months after my father's retirement. Global industry leaders convened to deliberate on supply chain management's future. As the keynote speaker, I took the stage. From the front row, my grandma was smiling with pride. I told the crowded auditorium that innovation isn't about tradition. It all comes down to having the guts to confront them. Nobody failed to notice the irony. When I revealed our most recent innovation, an update that would render conventional systems like Brown Technologies entirely outdated, Jacob came over to me at the reception following the summit. He appeared more modest and sincere. I sold my stock in my father's business. Instead, he launched a small sports coaching business after coming clean in my life for the first time. In fact, I'm content. When I realized that we had both discovered freedom in different ways, I grinned. By following his own path, he had managed to avoid our father's expectations, while I'd conquered them by exceeding them. My mother still sends periodic texts trying to negotiate peace between my father and myself. She doesn't realize that certain bridges aren't intended to be rebuilt. I have come to terms with that, just as I've come to terms with my path. I now share my true secret to success with young entrepreneurs who ask me for advice. Don't allow anybody else define your worth. Not proving them incorrect isn't the finest kind of retaliation. It's demonstrating your correctness. According to what I've been told, my father spends his days in his study, surrounded by the mahogany panels that previously saw his most significant error. His daughter was underestimated. The lessons we learn can sometimes be the most costly. It's too late. Story 3. When he saw my concern, Tom softened his tone and said, "It's just for tax purposes. You often talk about managing our money wisely. For our family, this is the best course of action." He took my hand across the counter, but there was something off about the way he touched it. Perhaps it was because his fingers didn't fit around mine as tightly as they once did, or perhaps it was the faint quiver in his voice that I heard. I stood looking at the papers in our kitchen. My heart was thumping hard against my chest as he slid across our marble countertop. The official letterhead on the house transfer paperwork stood out against the white background, as if to taunt me. After a long day, the twins were at last asleep upstairs, and here I was, with my 4-year husband, giving me what felt like an ultimatum. "You can call me Caitlin Wilson. I work as a doctor at Houston Methodist Hospital, and I'm 38 years old." 2 years prior to meeting Tom, I purchased this lovely Victorian home in the Heights neighborhood. With a great deal of diligent planning and the money I saved during my residency years, now, standing in my ideal kitchen that I'd rebuilt myself, I was being pressed to sign away my largest investment. You would see why this makes sense if you were genuinely concerned about our marriage. "In between your crazy hospital hours and your constant exhaustion," Tom added, moving the papers closer to me, "this family is being held together by me." I paused because of something in his tone, even though his words hurt. I had never heard it have such a sharp edge. Our twins, Emma and Ethan, were sleeping soundly in their cribs when I looked at the baby monitor on the counter. They looked just like me when they were 2 years old, same dark curls and olive skin. In order to give them every chance in life, I also worked multiple shifts at the hospital because of them. Tom had never seemed to get that my commitment to my work was not motivated by ambition. It was about providing for our children's future. I withdrew my hand and said, "I don't know, Tom. My security is this house. I purchased it before we were married." I noticed something flicker across his face as I spoke. Was it anger? Angry? Whatever it was, it vanished in an instant, to be replaced by what appeared to be routine worry. That night, as I lay awake in bed, his words kept replaying in my thoughts. But something else was resonating too. I couldn't entirely suppress the voice of caution. I was preparing for my shift at the hospital the following morning. There was something about Tom's actions that bothered me, Lately, he had been different, more distant, often checking his phone, working additional hours at his marketing company. I had dismissed it as his work-related stress. Now, though, along with his abrupt movement around the home, my medical intuition was warning me that something wasn't quite right. "Your jacket was delivered to the dry cleaners by me," Tom said as I hurried around the kitchen, attempting to pack the twins' daycare bags while scarfing down a slice of toast. "You may thank me later." His smile seemed forced, and he barely looked up from his phone. Just 6 months ago, he would have been helping me with the twins' luggage, making sure I ate a healthy breakfast before my shift. As I buckled Emma and Ethan into their car seats, I kept an eye on him. He had resumed going to the gym and had a bounce in his step that had been absent for years. Little adjustments that, although seemingly innocuous on their own, combined to create a picture I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to witness. I contacted my buddy Nina, who practiced real estate law in between patients at work. "Something doesn't feel right," I informed her, slipping into an empty exam room. "He is adamantly advocating for this transfer, claiming it is for tax considerations." Nina interrupted. "Caitlin, you would not receive any tax advantages if you just transferred the house into his name. If anything, the fact that you purchased it before to marriage would make matters more difficult." My blood froze. I hadn't done my research since I was too preoccupied with work and the twins. Wasn't that what Tom had expected? "Listen to me attentively," Nina said, her voice serious. "Don't sign anything. I don't want to frighten you, but I've seen this before. Property transfers are rarely pushed for by men unless they are part of a larger scheme. During a brief interval between patients that afternoon, I did something I had never done before." I looked over our phone logs. For months, Tom had been calling the same number a lot. When I performed a reverse lookup and a name came up, my hands shook. Martinez, Destiny. A short search on social media turned up a stunning woman in her mid-20s whose check-in times coincided with Tom's late work evenings. As I looked through her pictures, I stopped at one from 2 weeks earlier and my stomach turned. She was at a captioned real estate agency. There will be significant changes soon. A new chapter. Blessed. I shut the door to my office and sat quietly. My thoughts are racing. Years of medical training had taught me to trust my instincts when something seemed wrong. Those same instincts were now telling me that I had to defend my kids and myself. For the first time in months, I left work early that evening, rather of going to the creche to pick up the twins. I headed directly to a covert electronics store Nina had suggested. When I described what I required, the old man behind the counter hardly blinked. A high-quality recording gadget tiny enough to hide in my kitchen. "Protect yourself," he added softly while demonstrating how to use it for me. Their own statements are the greatest proof. Like every other night, I arrived home before Tom arrived to set up the equipment and begin supper. He seems taken aback by my presence. "There aren't any hospital emergencies today." His eyes were keen, yet his tone was casual as he inquired. I hoped we could discuss the house transfer in greater detail. As I stirred the spaghetti sauce, I spoke. "What you mentioned has been on my mind." His face lighted up with badly disguised triumph, and I saw his reflection in the kitchen glass. He approached me from behind and said, "I knew you'd come around. Kate, you're making the right decision. Our family will benefit most from this." During supper, his emphasis on family made me shiver. I listened to him speak, taking notes as he described his complex strategy for how the move would help us. He had been preparing this for months, and I could see with sickening clarity how deliberate and careful each lie was. I watched the twins slumber in their dark nursery after putting them to bed. As Ethan kicked off his blanket, Emma held on to her favorite stuffed giraffe. As usual, I was filled with protective wrath as I gazed at their placid features. Tom hadn't relied on a mother's instinct to defend her cubs, no matter what game he was playing. The days that followed were a haze of meticulous planning. Following Nina's suggestion, I started moving my share of our money to a different account, obtained new credit cards in my name alone, and made copies of all our financial records. Tom's steady breathing accompanied me while I lay awake every night, wondering when precisely my spouse had turned into a stranger. After a week, Tom brought home the final transfer documents that he had already signed. Sliding them across the counter, he replied, "Just your signature," the exact area where everything had all began. "After that, we can move on from this." I grabbed the pen. Despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins, my hand remained steady. I held the pen above the signature line as Tom watched carefully. I could see everything so vividly at that instant. His impatience, his barely concealed excitement, the way he kept glancing at his phone as if expecting a message. "In fact," I said, setting down the pen, "I believe we should discuss Destiny first." His cheeks lost color so quickly that I nearly burst out laughing. However, this was not amusing. I was equipped with proof, resolute anger, and a mother's rage, and this was the start of a fight. "What are you discussing?" Tom sputtered, but he was immediately identifiable by his face. His studied calm cracked as he grabbed automatically for his phone. "Who is Fate?" I took out my own phone and browsed through the screenshots I had meticulously gathered. "Destiny Martinez, 26 years old, works at your business. For the last 4 months, you've been going to Lorenzo's for lunch 3 times a week with her. The same place where you proposed to me, by the way. Well done." Tom's face changed from surprise to rage. "Have you been watching me? Defending myself?" I corrected, keeping my voice calm despite my pounding heart. "In the same way that you have been safeguarding our tax status via this house transfer." "Correct. I used to find his anxious habit of running his hands through his hair charming, but now he plopped down heavily on one of the kitchen stools." "It isn't what you believe." "Really?" "Because I believe you are attempting to move into my house by stealing it." "Your girlfriend?" Earlier that week, I played the recording, as he reassured Destiny that everything was proceeding as planned and that they would soon be reunited. His voice filled the kitchen. Emma's gentle whine crackled on the twins' monitor. When Tom looked above, I briefly noticed a look of remorse on his face. But it wasn't shame about betraying his family. It was remorse at getting caught. "You don't understand," he said, his tone altering to the placating one he employed with tough clients. "Things between us haven't been right for a long time. You're in the hospital all the time. You are hardly known by the twins. You dare not." I cut him off, my voice quiet but fierce. "You have no right to use our kids as an excuse for this. I strive to provide them with a future. What justification do you have for ruining their present?" Abruptly, his face flushed with rage, he stood up. "Don't you think you're really smart? The doctor is outstanding, always one step ahead. However, you are unaware of what it's like to live in your shadow. Destiny values me because I'm the guy who married up. She gets it. She is aware that you are attempting to take my house." I cut you off. "The home I purchased before to meeting you. The home where our kids first stepped foot," our attorney stated. "Your attorney?" "Behind my back, I fixed the one you've been meeting with. I was warned about him by Nina. He is well known for assisting husbands in concealing assets during separations." Tom's face became white. "Did you speak with Nina?" "I talk to a lot of people, Tom. Despite my work-related busyness, I'm not a moron." I took out another stack of documents that I had recovered, including bank statements, phone logs, and emails. "Really, you thought I wouldn't figure it out? That I would just sign away the house where my kids live? Because you batted your eyes and suggested taxes?" The baby monitor crackled again, this time with Ethan's wail joining his sister's. Tom started towards the stairs, but I stopped him. "Don't worry," I answered icily. "I'll look after our kids. You can take care of explaining to Destiny why her new chapter is going to have a different setting than she planned." I heard Tom's phone ding as I was going upstairs to console our twins. It was likely Destiny, who was wondering why her hero was running late for their meeting. Let her wonder. I had more pressing concerns, such as safeguarding my children's future from the man who was meant to assist me in creating it. "It's not over yet," Tom yelled after me as I reached the top of the steps. "You're making a huge mistake." I paused, looking down at him from the landing. "No, Tom. I made the grave error of assuming that I wouldn't defend what was rightfully mine. Emma and Ethan needed me in the nursery, so I turned my back on his flushed face and went there. When I woke up the following morning, Tom was gone. Most likely stayed overnight at Destiny's as I prepared the twins for nursery. Nina texted me and my phone chimed. He has seen his attorney. It's time to act quickly. I was ready for this already. During my lunch break, I met with James Cooper, the divorce attorney. Nina had suggested. His workspace was cozy and inviting, not at all like the bleak business settings I had anticipated. "Dr. Wilson," he replied, going over the proof I had collected. "I have to admit, I'm amazed. The majority of my clients contact me after the incident. We have everything we need from you to overcome this." "I had good instincts," I said, observing as he analyzed the videos. "Better than good." He grinned. These recordings, along with the documentation of his discussions with that other lawyer, provide unmistakable proof of his intent to deceive. Let's simply say that deliberate asset concealing is not well received by judges. Tom's messages flooded my phone while we spoke strategy. "We must speak. You are acting irrationally. Consider the twins." More urgent than the last message. He's becoming aware that his scheme is failing. James watched. "Be ready." They frequently become nasty at this point. He was correct. Tom's good guy persona had fallen apart by the time he returned home that evening. He hissed, "You think you're so smart," charging into the kitchen as I was preparing dinner for the twins. "However, you've simply made everything worse. On this, Destiny and I could have been reasonable. Please, stay at the guest house and be kind to the children." I couldn't resist laughing, which made him even more angry. My own house's guest house. "Our house?" Emma jumped in her high chair when he yelled, "I've spent 4 years here?" "Crazy?" Ethan's little face contorted in concern as he questioned. "Dad is simply worn out," I reassured Tom, warning him. "He's going to be gone for a while, you see." "I am. Like hell." Tom's voice was softer now, but he still snarled, conscious of the twins watching. "You are, in fact." Taking another paper out of my purse, I stated gently, "This restraining order is only in effect temporarily. After you texted me threatening me, my lawyer filed it this morning. The time allotted for packing is 1 hour. This is not possible." His face was pale as he whispered, "I did it already." "Tom, too." I slowly looked into his eyes. "You're welcome, Destiny. However, this is the house you attempted to rob your kids of. I own that, and I'll fight you with everything I've got if you think I won't. Obviously, you didn't know me at all." He stood there, jaws expanding and shutting like a fish out of water. His face was etched with the disintegration of his flawless plan as the truth of his circumstances finally set in. An hour later, I observed Tom pack his things into his vehicle from the window of the nursery. He continued to stare back at the home, as though he was still in shock that his scheme had failed so horribly. Behind me, blissfully oblivious to their father's departure, the twins played calmly with their blocks. "Goodbye." Emma saw me at the window and inquired, "Yes, dear, for the time being, Daddy is saying goodbye." I gave her a tight embrace. I let the smell of her baby shampoo ground me as I breathed it in. The next weeks were a haze of hospital shifts and legal sessions. Through his attorney, Tom launched a full-scale assault, seeking half of everything, including the mansion. But James was ready for him. "Did you see his face when we showed the videos in court?" James inquired at one of our sessions. "He never imagined that you may be smarter than him, even though he felt he was quite brilliant. The proof was incriminating. We had discovered something much more troubling than the fact that he had intended to cheat me of my premarital fortune. To pay for his extravagant dates with Destiny, Tom had been stealing from his marketing company." "Everything was discovered by our forensic accountant," James said, laying out bank statements on his desk. "For months, he has been cooking the books, most likely to keep up the lifestyle he pledged. Fate." I didn't miss the irony. Tom had always grumbled about feeling inferior to my accomplishments and living in my shadow. He had been causing his own demise. When the embezzlement was discovered by Tom's firm, they filed charges. It turned out that Destiny was not interested in a boyfriend who was being charged with a crime. She texted him to break up. One night when he arrived at the house intoxicated, he waved his phone and begged to come home, so I knew. "You subjected me to this?" I had to contact the cops when he yelled from the front garden, "Everything is damaged by you." I had an odd mixture of relief and sympathy as the cops escorted him away. I no longer recognized the man I'd married and the father of my kids, or perhaps he had always been that person. I hadn't noticed since I was too busy. I was surprised by how quickly the divorce was finalized. Tom couldn't afford a drawn-out legal battle because he was having legal issues with his firm. He agreed to more advantageous custody arrangements in exchange for the house signing away any claim. Twice weekly visits under supervision. "You've done a fantastic job with this," Nina informed me over coffee, weeks after everything had settled. The majority would have crumbled. Emma and Ethan were playing in my backyard, my house, my triumph. For them, I had to be strong, I said. And to be honest, Tom's greatest error and doom was to underestimate me. Nina inquired, "Do you know what became of her?" Recalling the previous tidbit of gossip I had heard, I grinned. It seems that she is currently seeing her real estate agent, who was meant to assist her in moving into my home. The irony made us both laugh. Ethan inquired when I was putting the kids to bed later that evening. "No, baby," Mama murmured, and I kissed his forehead. Mom isn't depressed, and I really did mean it for the first time in months. After my divorce from Tom, I had several unanticipated gifts. The fact that I could handle everything by myself wasn't the biggest surprise. I'd always been capable of it. It was seeing how much simpler life was without Tom's deceit weighing me down all the time. Without Tom's subtly disparaging remarks and passive-aggressive remarks on my hours, my career took off. My enthusiasm for my work has returned. Tom had always said that I would never be promoted to Chief of Emergency Medicine while taking care of twins. The twins fared better than I had anticipated. I was first concerned about how they would handle the changes. However, kids are incredibly resilient. As Tom's legal issues worsened, they reduced the frequency of their supervised visits. After completing his time, he traveled to Dallas and ultimately accepted a plea agreement for the embezzlement allegations. Fate. Through common friends, I learned that they had moved on to another affluent target. I occasionally questioned whether she had recognized how nearly she had been caught in Tom's web of deception. I doubt she viewed it that way, but she sort of dodged a bullet. The home that Tom had so desperately attempted to take away from me turned into a real sanctuary. I made the house I had always dreamed of, remodeled the twins' rooms, and planted a garden. Each mortgage payment was a triumph, a reminder of how I had safeguarded my property. Nina made fun of me for dating again, but I was happy to concentrate on my work and kids. Later, romanticism would have its place. For the time being, I was content with the serenity that came from knowing that I had not only made it through Tom's treachery, but had also come out stronger. I thought about how different life had become one peaceful evening when I was sitting on my porch and watched Emma and Ethan play in our front yard. In the same yard where Tom had stood that night, intoxicated and furious about how I had destroyed his life, the twins were running about, their laughter reverberating throughout the neighborhood. Tom and Destiny had just reconciled briefly in Dallas, but they broke up again once she found out he was still on probation and working as a junior copywriter at a small firm, according to rumors I heard from the hospital, from marketing professional to convicted felon, from Family Guy to cautionary tale. His decline from grace had been remarkable. I was aware of the irony that his frantic attempt to seize my house had cost him his freedom, his profession, and, above all, his connection with his kids. Now, the twins hardly recalled their everyday existence with him. He had become into the father they saw on the weekends, constantly making an effort with pricey presents and phony excitement. "Look, Mum," Ethan applauded as Emma excitedly yelled out and gave me a cartwheel. These were the important moments. Not the house, not the triumph against Tom's plots, but the pure delight of seeing my kids develop and flourish. Tom had sent me a letter a few days prior, expressing his sincere remorse and apologies. I didn't answer and filed it aside. After being burned, certain bridges shouldn't be rebuilt. Rather, I concentrated on creating new ones, enhancing my relationships with my kids, my work, and above all, my dignity.